Hey everyone, Stacks here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Sit back and get comfortable. Hit that subscribe button and get ready to roll, because today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different. A lot of people are saying that it is something that has actually ruined House of X, Powers of X, and ruined all the stakes in the Xmen series going forward. And my argument may seem counterintuitive at first, but stay with me to the end and hear me out, because I have a point here. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm going to be talking about the resurrection protocols and the ability that the mutants now have to cheat death. And Jonathan Hickman has laid this groundwork to raise the stakes during this X-Men run. But a lot of people are saying that in doing so, he's completely eliminated the stakes because death no longer matters. So I'm going to make a couple arguments. First of all, that what he's done is actually imperative to tell this story and to raise the stakes. I'm also going to make the argument that the stakes for Krakoa and mutantkind have never been higher. Alright, so I said initially that this concept is counterintuitive. The idea that since everybody can simply respawn at the start point with 100% health and full ammo, that it creates boring stories, because even if everyone on a team dies, it really doesn't matter because they can make another run at it. Now, book to book and during an individual event, I don't disagree with that at all, honestly. For instance, Apocalypse sacrificing himself in Excalibur number 5 had zero emotional impact. Even at the end of an issue, it was just like, well, he'll be back by 6. Kid Omega, him going through the portal and getting decapitated, no real impact other than the initial wow, I can't believe that happened factor. And as these books go on, that's probably going to continue to be the case. Outside of Kitty Pryde, which probably deserves a whole video, to herself, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on there, we're expected to just accept the fact that death is going to happen and resurrection is going to happen, and it's just part of it. And that's one of the things that has a lot of people kind of in an uproar, is that it really doesn't matter issue to issue because they're just going to be right back. And it's kind of an individualistic approach. The stakes are still high for Krakoa. They're still building this nation. There's still an end game out there that involves the complete destruction of mutantkind. Moira, Xavier, and Magneto have just pulled out all the stops this time and are trying everything to survive. In my opinion, it's not that the stakes don't exist. It's just a much bigger game than what we're used to. Typically, a lot of X-Men focus, especially during the Claremont days, was on individuals. You had those individuals that you really liked, and so of course they were part of a larger team, and eventually the character building on all the characters kind of came around to where you had these different personalities, and you enjoy. Of course you enjoyed different characters more than others, but you built this relationship with all these characters. Right now there's so many characters that it's really hard to do that unless you're an old school X-Men fan and you've been doing this for years. So with those individual relationships, when you had a death, when you had somebody that, whatever happened on a mission and somebody died, it was significant, and the reaction from the other characters was this emotional reaction, and it all tied together to knit this story that in a lot of ways was about these characters' humanity and their relationships and that feeling of loss. And that was actually some of the best issues and led to a bunch of internal conflict in the storylines, But in all honesty, how many times have some of these characters died now and been resurrected anyways? How many times have we seen Jean Grey die? How many times have we seen Wolverine die? How many times has Professor X died? How many times has it been where, death is something that happens in comic books to characters, not just within the X-Men, but across the Marvel landscape. And I'm sure the first couple times that a character showed up after being dead, it was a big deal. But nowadays in comic books, when somebody dies, you almost just roll your eyes and you expect them to be back. It's not a trope that's limited to the X-Men. The list of Marvel characters that have died and then found their way back to living because of some magical MacGuffin is absolutely endless. So with this kind of as the set standard, and honestly a tired standard that exists for a number of reasons, a lot of them sales based. We know that you don't kill off popular characters, and if you do so for a while because a death of blank creates a sales spike, and then when you bring them back with a new number 1, you're going to get another sales spike. But with this trope of being able to defeat death repeatedly, kind of hanging over comic books, hanging over Marvel Comics, and hanging over the X-Men, Jonathan Hickman decided to do something different in that he wasn't going to try to just incorporate it, or wasn't just going to write it and kill a character and have somebody else sort it out after he was done with his run and bring them back. Instead, he decided just to full-on embrace it. Now, in my opinion, he embraced it in an absolutely genius way by incorporating the power sets of these 5 mutants that, working together along with the genetic material provided by Mr. Sinister and throwing Professor X in there with Cerebro, they're able to come together and carry out this incredible power set combination that results in respawning of a character to an earlier version of themselves. And I say this was pretty genius because it was woven into the fabric of pre-existing characters, pre-existing power sets, and stuff that was already going on. I mean, Mr. Sinister has always been this guy trying to collect the genetic material. Cerebro, and being able basically to add it as a, hey, we're going to have a download function in the back now. We just got to put it on some servers, and we'll be able to download consciousness. I mean, all of this stuff was already out there. It just had to be developed a little bit more. And in doing this, and in developing all this, he's allowed himself to tell these incredibly high stakes mutant versus human machine supremacy stories while showing how dangerous the X-Men's enemies truly are. And it raises the X-Men because of their ability to resurrect themselves to a new plane amongst the superhero community. If we had an X-Men Dawn of X rogues gallery that was incapable of ever killing a mutant, this would get really boring really fast. At least it's raised the ability or the threat level of the enemies, because we're losing X-Men on a regular basis and having to keep the 5 pretty busy at this point. Now, why do I think that's a big deal is it honestly establishes a new status quo for how dangerous these individuals are, and I think this immortality that they think they have is going to be fragile. And what do I mean by this fragile immortality? What I mean is that there's the potential for some really great stories, because while now Hickman can tell insane stories of high conflict, high casualty operations, I mean war. He can go to all-out war and have some craziness between all kinds of factions. Eventually, something is going to threaten the 5. And when that happens, the stakes are going to go through the roof. And when something does finally threaten the 5 or even takes the 5 out, that eliminates this status quo of a resurrection. That puts them back on an even playing ground with everybody else. And they lose their biggest advantage, this carelessness, this recklessness that they have right now. Things like charging blindly through a portal, or jumping into a fight and then realizing whoever you're fighting has power dampening technology. All that stuff becomes a lot more dangerous when suddenly I don't get that respawn back at the start point. These individual conflicts will go back to having that immediate impact. It'll go back to having those immediate consequences on the mutants of Krakoa, especially if they burned all these bridges, because in their what do I want to say here? Arrogance. In their arrogance, they thought themselves so far above humanity that they could treat them as if they were lesser beings, as if they didn't have, my buddy Ash said it really well, they didn't have inalienable rights. They were looked at as a lesser being. Sue Storm said it as well. You value the life of a mutant more so than you do the life of a human being. I'm getting off topic a little bit. Let me steer this back to a further conversation about death. We've also seen how death, the embodiment of death, Mistress Death, is being affected by the resurrection protocols and the green door that's happening over in Immortal Hulk. These two items, for whatever reason, they're having this effect on her, because the stranglehold of death, the certainty of death, no longer exists for all beings, and that's causing some big issues. And this was actually talked about over in Valkyrie number 7. Somebody told me about this, went and picked it up and checked it out, and it's pretty interesting, and it could have some big concepts going forward. As far as, think about the individuals that in Marvel Comics worship death, and in particular Thanos. Now, Thanos is out of the game right now because he fell in some kind of black hole during Guardians of the Galaxy. But it's also been shown in Guardians of the Galaxy that he reemerges in the future. Because we all know in the future, Thanos wins. So, how interesting would it be for Thanos, to lead this charge against the X-Men and taking out the Five? Or, for him to have Hela by his side while he does it even. I know Hela and Mistress Death are two different beings in Marvel, so don't try to get me there. But him and Hela have been, we'll say, close. She was the one leading the charge to bring him back over in the Guardians of the Galaxy storyline, despite the fact that he dumped her back in Thor. I think it was the 2019 Thor number 4 that happened in. Whenever this does finally happen, it's going to be very interesting because you're once again going to see that separation between villains and heroes. The self-serving and those who would lay down their lives for others and be an actual hero. Anyways, guys, all in all, I really like what Hickman's done. He took a trope and he owned it in a brilliant way. A way that's interesting, it uses existing characters and power sets, and at its core, it remains vulnerable. That vulnerability, it will at some point provide us a storyline that's going to be worth reading. And when it does, all said and done, they could just have Wolverine kill Moira again. Because that's been my long-standing prediction, is that Wolverine is going to be the one who, something's going to happen, and he's going to be the one that resets this timeline completely and takes us to Moira's 11th life. This time, I don't think it's going to be with Moira necessarily agreeing to it. Anyways, guys, I do ultimately think that this resurrection stuff is a phase. We're gonna grow out of it. The storyline's gonna take us away from this eventually. It's just a phase that we kind of got to get through. Enjoy it while it lasts. Enjoy some of the aspects of it while it lasts, because at some point we will get away from it and we will go back to when somebody dies. We have to wait a significant amount of time before we see him again in comic books. All right, so me wrapping it up, complete finale. I like it for now. I don't think it's going to last forever. And when they do eliminate it, it's going to be a huge story arc. It's going to be awesome. And it's going to put some stakes back on Krakoa. And then we're probably going to get the reset of the timeline again after that with Moira's 11th life. But like you, I have to wait and see. So just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications. And leave your comments down below. When do you think this is going to happen? How long do you think it's going to take before we have something threaten the Five? Or better yet, do you think it's going to come from inside of Krakoa? Are we going to get Mystique do it? Or is it going to come from an outside threat? You guys tell me down in the comments below. I appreciate you sticking around watching this video, listening to me rant a little bit, and I hope you guys have a great week. That's all I got. Real Comic Stacks, out.